Good afternoon and welcome to today's panel on the Druze Israeli community in 2021, brought to you by the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York. My name is Noam Gilbord, and as the Director of Israel and International Affairs, I'll be your moderator for the next hour. This Saturday, in synagogues and Zoom services across the world, Jewish communities will read this week's Torah portion known as Yitro, or Jethro. The Torah teaches us that after the exodus of the children of Israel from slavery, Jethro met up with his son-in-law Moses, who was struggling to attend to all the problems the Israelites had with their newfound freedom. Jethro offered his son-in-law some excellent advice that instead of having each individual come to him directly, he should establish the biblical Israelite version of local, regional, and federal judges, all under the supreme judge of God and his servant Moses. Thus, on Jethro's advice, the foundation of Western democratic legal systems was built. Now, sorry about that. Jethro, you see, has great significance in Jewish tradition, but perhaps even more so in the tradition of the Druze. Jethro, you see, is revered as the chief prophet of the Druze religion. And for this reason, this week, the week when Jews recite the Jethro Torah portion, we have chosen, this week has been chosen by the Druze Veterans Association in Israel for communities around the world to show their gratitude to the Druze community in Israel for their incredible service as a non-Jewish community to the state of Israel. The Druze community represents less than 2% of the Israeli population, numbering approximately 140,000 people. And unlike other Arabic-speaking populations in Israel, the Druze are unique in that their men proudly serve in the Israeli Defense Forces. Yet because of this small community has sacrificed greatly for the cause of Israel's security. More than 500 Druze have perished in battle, and more than 1,500 have been wounded. Recognition of this community is long overdue. So today, in this program, we say shukran, todah, and thank you to the Druze community of Israel for its immense contributions to Israel. With that, we invite you now, all of our attendees, to join us in celebrating the Druze community and exploring their lived experiences as Israelis. We now welcome our panelists for today, each of them prominent members of the Druze community in Israel and around the world. Ambassador Reda Mansour is the Israeli ambassador to Panama after having served in other prominent diplomatic posts in Brazil, Ecuador, Portugal, Atlanta, and San Francisco. He holds a PhD from Haifa University in the history of modern Syria, a master's degree from Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, and he speaks 5 languages. The ambassador was a professor in the Israeli National Defense College and at Emory University in Atlanta. He is recognized as a longtime activist for the promotion of dialogue and integration of minorities. In addition to his diplomatic career, Ambassador Mansour has been awarded for publishing 4 books of poetry, as well as a number of short stories. Thank you for being with us, Ambassador. Our next guest is Chef Gazala Halabi, who is the most well-known female Druze chef and entrepreneur in New York. She grew up with 6 siblings in Daliat El Carmel, Israel's largest Druze village, where her family operates a restaurant and her grandmother owns a spice shop. Chef Halabi's business career began with a home-based catering company, and a few years later expanded to 2 restaurants in Manhattan's neighborhoods of Hell's Kitchen and the Upper West Side. Her restaurants, Gazala's, feature typical Druze dishes as well as traditional Middle Eastern and Israeli fare, and she is widely recognized as the chef who introduced Druze Israeli cuisine to New York City. Welcome, Gazala. And Professor Salman Zarka is the Director General of the Ziv Medical Center, the largest hospital in Israel outside of the center of the country, serving all residents of Israel's northern region. He graduated from the Technion's Faculty of Medicine in 1988, holds a master's degree in public health from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and an additional master's degree in political science from the University of Haifa. Prior to his position at Ziv Hospitals, Professor Zarka served as a colonel in the IDF for 25 years in a variety of positions, the last of which was commander of the Military Health Services Department in the IDF Professor Zarka was the head of the Medical Corps of the Northern Command and the commander of the Military Field Hospital for the Syrian casualties in the Golan Heights. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us today and being so giving of your time. We'll get right into it. The first question is this. All of you are representatives of Israel in your different fields, and you're from a society that is 80% Jewish. So I'd like to hear, tell us a little bit about your experiences growing up as Druze in Israeli society, in the Jewish state, essentially. What do you see as the defining aspects of Druze society, and how did your identity impact your growth personally and professionally? Anyone can start.
Well, I'll take the lead on this one. First of all, I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to appreciate a great community in Israel that is not that much known, and to emphasize this model of coexistence that we have in Israel that should be, I think, a model for the entire country and could be a worldwide model as well. As you can imagine, growing up in a Jewish society among an ancient nation with a very long history and tradition is something very special. I think many people in Israel take it for granted, but the fact that we speak Hebrew almost as bilinguals, almost as first language, this is the language of the Bible. We live in a country where you will be probably consuming most of your food is kosher from the supermarkets. We read Hebrew newspapers. So the Jewish environment for us is all over the place. It's a major cultural issue. But the Druze as well are another ancient nation, 1,004 years of existence this year. And so we have a very strong identity, and we've been managing it, I think, nicely, how to integrate. I think we have a lot in common. These are two communities who want to integrate in the countries where they live. Their culture is a peaceful culture of integration, and we'll use any opportunity that we are given to integrate more. So it's always interesting, sometimes funny, because we feel that we might know about Judaism more than many Jews around the world, because we live in it every day. We have to be, I think all of us are ambassadors in an unofficial way, because most people around the world think that Israel is a Jewish state. That means that every Israeli is Jewish. So the conversation usually starts there to try and explain what's Druze. You know, it's partly Arab, but it's not Palestinian. It's Israeli, but it's not Jewish. Always interesting.
So, Chef Halabi, would you like to talk about some of your experiences growing up as a Druze in Israel?
Absolutely. I think I'm not going to talk about being in Israel that much, because I didn't feel it as much as I feel it right now, living in New York. I would say 95% from my friends are Israelis. We are here like family. So I think I am lucky to be Israeli, Druze. There is not that many Druze over here, but at least we have a few Israeli Jews that we create our own world here, and we feel like family. We celebrate holidays together, sometimes even Shabbat together. So I'm proud to be a Druze Israeli.
Thank you. Professor Zarka, tell us a little bit about your history growing up in Israel.
Good evening from Israel. It seems that I'm the only one at Israel. All of you are abroad. Nice to meet you again, Noam. No, I will start with, I was born for a big Druze family, 8 children, and in a wonderful place at the Galilee. And my parents planted in us and the children Druze values of modesty, justice, keeping traditions that allow us to stay as a nation. It seems very similar to the Jewish history. They learned how to survive as a minority for many years and to have really a big loyalty for our identity and for belonging to the place where we live, to the place, to the land, to the people. Although my parents weren't educated, maybe due to that, they emphasized the importance of higher education at the military services in the IDF. It seems that these values from my parents, from my identity as a Druze, continue with my career. These days, as a hospital director, I have a big duty to provide all the people, not just only the Druze people or the Jewish community, with the best available medical services, saving their lives and make them better. That's why I am a physician without any special emphasis of what identity of I have, of which religion I belong to. I really do my job for the whole mosaic of the Israelis at the north of Israel, and I'm really very proud with the 1,800 employees at Ziv Hospital that belong to this wonderful diversity of religions in my area. You know, it is very complicated situation with the pandemic and with the political instability. And I'm really trying to do my best in order to have a home and a family atmosphere at the hospital and to contribute to some stability in this area with the diversity of the people living and need my services at Ziv Hospital.
Thank you for that. You know, one of the things you mentioned was family, and obviously family makes up society, and we are. I am proud. I'm not going to speak we, but I am proud of all the roles that you all three of you play, representing the Druze community and Israeli society in Israel and around the world. I want to be very clear about that. I do want to ask Gazala a question, though. Gazala, when we were speaking yesterday, you mentioned, you mentioned a little bit about the role of women in Druze society and that the role of women has been progressing. So I'm curious to know from your perspective, where was the role of women in Druze society when you were growing up, and where do you see it now?
I don't think it's like a lot of changes happening, but for sure there is some. I will say I wasn't even allowed, like I mentioned yesterday, to wear pants like till 2001 till I came here to New York. And right now it's different. You could see all the girls, you know, they wearing pants, but also I comparing, let's say, to the Druze in different countries, we still limited somehow, which is also, it's a good thing in my opinion, because we were raised like women, they are like a diamond. So when they are young, their parents protect them. And when they grow up, they have to protect themselves. So they raise us in a way that it will stay with us forever, you know, the way they raise us. Like the rules right now, I'm passing it to my kids. Even here in big city, New York, still you could see my kids, they are 100% Druze. And this has come from the family, from the community, from our leaders. So we are a very strong family altogether. And again, I'm proud to be part of it.
Thank you. Ambassador, Professor, do you guys have sisters?
Yeah, I have one sister. I think actually that the status of Druze women had changed dramatically in my lifetime. When I was growing up in the generation of my parents, women in the Druze community could study until the end of only the primary school. From that, in my lifetime, we passed into a situation where 70% of our students in universities today are women. And as we speak, there are women professors, Druze, doing scientific investigation in London, in Washington, D.C., and even in the atomic accelerator in Switzerland. So we are seeing really a true revolution in the status of Druze women. Obviously, we came from a very traditional place. For many years, we were persecuted community. We had to defend everybody. That's why we live only in mountaintops, all the way from the Carmel to the border of Syria and Turkey. And we couldn't have too much change until the 20th century. But I think if you look at it in our lifetime, what we see today is really an amazing change. We're still not, on the same line like modern societies in America or some of the Israeli society. But I think the change is real. The academization is very important. And that will change everything else. So I'm optimistic about this process, and we have to be, smart. How do we open everything up, but we find ways to conserve our society? In the end, we are a very small nation, about 1 million people around the world, 1.5 million maximum. And we are very unique, and I think we should struggle to keep the basics of our identity and our community.
Thank you. Professor Zarka, you've smiled a lot. What do you have to say?
I have 6 sisters. 2 are younger than me, and 4 are oldest. I am 56 years old. My oldest sisters finished only primary school. This was regular at that time, but things really are getting changed because my youngest sisters, one is a nurse and the other is a director of a school at the village. My wife is a master in social worker, so really things are getting changed. But I think we need to go further kilometers in order to have an equality between men and women. I really believe that women's status at the society is an important rule in order to proceed to a better future. I agree with the Reda that we have to find the way how to do it and how to stay in our tradition, in our unique tradition. But I think it's a big challenge how to be part of the big world and how to stay with our uniqueness. And we need to think about it and to consider the different sides.
I hear you. I had a history professor who liked to say that at one time the Jewish community in America is part of the American ethos and apart from it at the same time. And I'm getting the same sense from what you're saying.
Absolutely.
So I want to move this conversation a little forward. Gazala, you and I, again, when we talked yesterday, you spoke about Druze conferences that you attend, I hope not during COVID, but that you attended regularly, where you meet Druze from other countries. So, on the one hand, as Ambassador Mansour said, you're members of the same tribe, but you're a little different because you're Israeli, and then there's geopolitics. Your cousins essentially. Other Druze communities are in Lebanon, are in Syria, and there's challenges with diplomatic relations between Israel and those countries. So what's it like when you encounter Druze from other countries?
The first time I start to go to conventions, I start going in 2016. I was so excited. I met Druze from Lebanon, Syria, some Spanish countries as well. I will say, no doubt, the feeling like I feel they are my people somehow. You know, it's I am very connected to them. But I felt I raised like a Druze Israeli. They raised like a Druze Lebanese or Syrian. So we are different in like the way we grow up, the way we also believe in stuff. But I think it was amazing that I don't believe that they met so many Druze Israeli before, and sharing my idea and their idea. It's like it was like it changed a little bit, because the way they grow up thinking about Israel, I believe it was a little bit tough. And when I spoke about being a Druze Israeli and our relationship with the Israelis, Jewish, it make a little bit different, I would say. But thanks to America, I get the chance to meet other Druze because I have Israeli passport. We all know, like Israelis, we cannot visit it any of most, I will say, most of the Arab countries. But over here, I get the chance to meet with other Druze. But again, I will say the feeling like being with the Druze, it's the same like when I meet a Druze in Israel. We are same blood, like cousins, family, but we raised differently, I would say. The way we look at things, it's differently. So, yeah.
Thank you. Ambassador Mansour, you look like you want to say something on this.
Yeah, well, it's you know, I think the three of us probably had these experiences. It's not an easy situation because we have to remember that most of the Druze live in Lebanon and Syria, and these are enemy countries. So for them to speak publicly to an Israeli, basically you can be put in jail just for speaking with one of us. So it's not an easy situation. For us, it's easier because Israel doesn't limit us, and you know, I never had anybody in Israel telling me you can't meet Syrians or Lebanese. So it's a complicated issue. As I said before, our Druze identity is very strong. So we could see it in the civil war in Syria when there was a massacre in northern Syria. You know, within 3 days, the Israeli Druze community raised more than $2 million and sent it over there. And we don't know these people. We didn't meet them for the last 70 years. So you can see that the connection is very strong. And we are put in a very cruel situation in the end. You know, we have a culture of being extremely patriotic to our countries, but our countries are in a state of war. So I think the formula that we developed without declaring it formally is that if there is any conflict of interest or a war between our countries, we are going to fight for our countries. But if there is no conflict of interest or war between our countries, we are going to stand for our Druze brothers and sisters. And this is what we have been doing in Israel. We helped the Druze in Lebanon during the 80s. We are helping the Druze in Syria today. Yesterday, I received a message from a Syrian Druze asking me for financial help from the Druze mountain in Syria, although he knows that I'm an Israeli ambassador. So we are connected, and now with the social media, it makes it even more possible. And this is the point that we always have to make, and we pay a very dear price for that. You know, when we go to war, we know that there are Druze on the other side, so it's not an easy feeling. But in the end, we had to make a decision, and our decision was: first, you be patriotic for your country, but if there is no conflict of interest, you're going to help your community survive. And this is what we're trying to do.
We're definitely going to come back to that a little bit, but thank you for that, Professor Zarka. I have to ask because the ambassador brought it up. You and your capacity working at Ziv Hospital with the Syrian civil war. Do you ever find yourself treating Druze Syrians, and what's that experience like for you?
As you maybe know, when you visited Ziv, and you mentioned it when you introduced me before, I constructed a military field hospital at the border with Syria, and later I met the Syrians at Ziv Hospital when they came to the border asking for medical support. One principle in providing medical support, in providing humanitarian aid, is not to deal with the identity of these people. We never ask them about their belonging, about their religion. We just ask about their diseases, their medication, and the way that they get hurt. I do not know if I treated any Druze, but if I did it, I'm not familiar with that. I hope I did. Druze at Syria mostly they were at Assad regime side, and mostly this part of Syria did not come to the border asking for help from their enemy, from Israel. So I'm not. I believe that mostly the wounded were not Druze.
Got it. All right. So let's move this conversation towards Israel itself. The Druze community is certainly a minority in Israeli society, but even amongst Arabic speakers in Israel, the Druze community is a minority there too. Ambassador Mansour says we're part of the Arab community and also not but not Palestinian. So what? Let's talk about that. Many Arab Israelis identify as Palestinian citizens of Israel. So given the Druze community and its service in the IDF, as opposed to other Arab communities and Jewish communities in Israel, what is the relationship between the Israeli Druze and other Israeli Arab communities? I'll start with the ambassador.
It's as you said, it's a complicated issue. It's complicated to a point that in Israel, if you say that you're Arab, the Jewish Israelis hear that you're saying you are Palestinian. And this has happened to me, thanks to a great American, Leslie Wexner. I received the Wexner Foundation Scholarship to Harvard. And when I presented myself there, I said, I'm an Arab Israeli and I'm a Druze. And when I went off the stage, my Israeli friends told me, did you just say that you are Palestinian? I said, where did you hear that I said that I am Palestinian? So for Israeli Jews, the word Arab is not just about culture, just about language. It's loaded with political meaning. It's a very sensitive situation. And to the Arabs in Israel, it's the same thing. Arabs think about us that the Palestinians who broke away, they don't understand why do we behave like we behave. So we always have to juggle in between these two societies. I think in our best wishes, we want to be that bridge between the Arab community and the Jewish community. And we want to be a model that Arabs, and I do believe that we are Arabs as Druze, could live together with Jews and could build together this country. It's not easy though. As you said, we are a minority within a minority. Let's not forget that the Jews are a minority in the region. So we are a small minority in the Arab minority, which is a minority in the Jewish community, which is the minority in the wider region. So it's a cascade of identities that we have to manage. But I think I'm not worried about the Druze. We're very good diplomats. We're very good in internal politics. And we've been managing to survive this way for 1,000 years. So I think we'll find solutions to that.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to ask a question about the elections that are coming up and the ones that already happened. Israel has a thriving democracy, a tapestry of different peoples, as the ambassador said, minorities here, there, everywhere. Israelis like their democracy so much that they're having their fourth election in 2 years, right? We love going out to the polls. So the question for you is, what are the voting patterns of the Druze community? Is it a monolith? Is it a block? Or are people all over the place? What are the issues as well that Druze voters tend to raise up of all issues? Let's start with Gazala.
I'm not that familiar, with what's going on with the election, but I will talk about my village. Just especially recently, I think everybody voted, especially after Leom law, the new law that everybody wanna have a voice and have the right to vote. I wish I voted. I could get the chance to vote as well, but I think recently people really voted. But I'm not that familiar again. I live in different country right now. I read the news. I will always check, what's going to happen and get familiar more, but still I don't live there. So I am not the right one to talk about this.
We'll ask Professor Zarka then, and then we'll get to Ambassador Mansour, who's chomping
at. I will try to connect between the two questions, the relation between the Druze and the Arabs and the election period. I think it's complicated and getting worse. It's getting more complicated, especially after Chok HaLeom. Druze at Israel is decided for many years, although before Israel was established at 1936, to be with a connection with the Jewish community and to take part in building this state at the independence war. After that, asked the government not just to volunteer to the army, to enlist the Druze fellows by law. So this is the decision of the Druze, the Israeli Druze community, and I believe that this decision is stable, although after Chok HaLeom. But when you connect it with the relationship between Druze and Arabs, especially after Chok HaLeom, I can say that many Arab politicians are knocking the door of the Druze community and asking him to think again, to rethink about their loyalty, about their belonging, to get back to the Arab community. So Chok HaLeom really is the factor, the major factor that makes things seems different. If we look at the last election, many of the Druze decided to elect to Benny Gantz because Benny Gantz promised that he will make some change in Chok HaLeom, and they let the Druze be a prominent part of the Israelis. I believe that we will still in the same situation because Chok HaLeom wasn't changed. and we believe that we are very, very Israeli, and we want to be a part of the Israeli, although by law, not just by our feeling. Maybe some of us feel that by this law, the Israeli government, and I really, during my career, I know to make the differences between the state, the people, and the government. So the ex-government had a decision about making the law and put from my point of view, put the Druze outside the camp. I still feeling part of the camp. I still feeling part of the Israeli, and I really want to feel that the government take what it is necessary in order to be part of this, although by the law.
So I hear you loud and clear. Ambassador, what does the Israeli government, and you are a representative of the Israeli government, what does the Israeli government have to do after the nation state, the Chok HaLeom, to sort of regain the trust, I guess, of the Druze community? What are the policies? What are the changes that need to be made?
Yeah. Well, you know, I think that we have to mention another law that is in play right now, which is what we call the law of Kamenetz, or the new changes in the law regarding planning and construction and Druze in general in Israel, which deeply affect the Druze towns and villages. So the Druze felt in the last couple of years that they've been hit with two laws that are very problematic. One hit you in your daily life, and the other one hit you in your aspiration to be a part of this country. So as we speak, the Kamenetz regulations made it a felony, basically, to have any kind of breach of the regulations of the construction. So right now we have 14 Druze majority towns and villages. Most of them don't have a master plan. So by definition, if you want to build, you're going to build illegally. And while in the past you used to pay some fees and continue on, now it's a crime. It's basically a felony. You can go to jail, and you will pay hundreds of thousands of dollars as fines. So since this change, our villages are really suffering, and our young people are waiting basically for some change. They've been promised by several Israeli politicians to change the Kamenetz regulation. It didn't happen yet. So basically, this is a major issue for us, very painful issue. On the level of our identity, the problem with the nationality law, the Chok HaLeom, is that it gave some of the Jewish community in Israel a sense that it's just another way to say what has been happening all the time, that Israel is a Jewish state. Because what's in this law? It's the flag and the national anthem and the language. For us, the problem was not what the law has, what it doesn't have. So we never had a problem with the flag. As you see, I have it here behind me. It's even I'm sitting in my home right now and not in my office. I have another flag in my home. I don't have a problem with the national anthem, although it has its own sensitivities, because the Druze have to sing Nefesh Yehudi Homiyah, so it's not a simple thing. But we don't have problems with these symbols of the states. Our problem is that it doesn't say anything about our belonging to this place. And the Druze from day one never sought to be just an accidental guests in this project. The Druze joined the Zionist movement in 1937, not in 1948. They were the father and the mother founders of this country. That's why, our national feeling does not accept nothing less than a full citizenship that is declared by law. And that's why this situation cannot continue. So, we're a democratic country. Our young people are very angry. We will continue to struggle against this. I think both laws are very big mistakes. They need to be changed. They need to be to give an answer to the Druze community. And as you mentioned in the beginning, we are not passive citizens. We have paid in full for our citizenship. 500 dead soldiers in the military in a community which is 1% of the population. This is a very, very high price to pay, and we're willing to pay it. We are already fourth and fifth generation serving in the military. In Israel, just for you to know, this year only 50% of the 18 years old will go to the military. 50%. In the Druze community, 87% go. In Israel, Haredi Jews don't serve in the military, and religious Jews do only 1.5 years. We serve 3 years, and most of us serve much more. So we are very active members in this project. We love it. We are very proud in it, and we will not accept any compromises in our identity. We are full Israelis. We are going to ask for it. And again, I feel confident that we are going to make it. We asked before about the Druze political participation. The Druze are very shrewd in politics. If we all vote to one Druze party, we will maybe have 1 or 2 Knesset members. Typically, our average is 5 or 6. And the reason is that we play the Israeli politics. We are in different parties. We don't like sectorial parties. We like to be in the big parties usually, and we manage to leverage our political power. So we will continue to struggle, and these 2 laws have to be changed because they are really hurting the Druze community today. It's really painful. I don't know how to answer my kids when they ask me about these 2 laws. I don't have answers for them. The only thing that I can say that we are brave enough to continue the struggle and to make sure that it will change. And I think most of the Israeli public in the end understand that these things need to be changed. So it's just a political issue.
Thank you very much for explaining all of that. I want to move to an equally challenging issue, which is COVID-19. And I'm looking to Professor Zarka again, because Professor, you're one of the leaders in Israel's battle against this pandemic. So I want to ask you, how has this pandemic affected the Druze community specifically? I also want to ask you about vaccinations in Israel, because that's getting a lot of attention in the media right now. Is the Druze community in Israel being vaccinated at the same rate as non-Druze Israeli citizens? And then I'll ask you the kicker at the end.
Okay. I believe that this virus, the COVID-19, explain again that there is no differences between people. All the people with different religions, with different nations, are hit by the virus. It is the same at Israel. With the first, when it was introduced to Israel at March 2020, we thought that the Arab community and the Druze community are naturally immunized against the virus, but later all the communities were hit, unfortunately, with the virus. This morning, I put what it is needed in order to protect myself, although I am already immunized with the 2 shots, and I visited the 3 COVID-19 departments that I have at Ziv Hospital. This day I have 42 COVID-19 patients at the outbreak departments, and I visited in order to strengthen my staff that really work very hard in order to save these people's life, and in order also to talk in Arabic, in Hebrew, and in English with the patients that are lying one near the other. And all of them are belonging to the different diversity of the Galilee. There are Haredim from Tzfat, Druze from Khorfesh, Druze village, Jews from Kriyat Shmona, and all of them are together at the same department, suffering again, unfortunately, from the same COVID-19 that hit all of us. Druze community at Israel, I think they were the first to react against the virus. I can remember I called the Professor Itamar Grotto, the deputy of Ministry of Health CEO, when he get back from Japan, and I discussed with him that we have to say something about kissing mezuzot, because kissing mezuzot can spreading the virus. And then I understood that in the Druze tradition, Haredim Druzim, religious Druzim, when they meet, they shake hand and kiss one another. The hand, it's part of modesty to say that all of us are equal. Then I met with the religious committee, Druze committee, and asked them to consider to close the praying rooms, what is called Halawi, and to stop kissing one each other hand. Is the same or at the same pattern of kissing mezuzot. So the Druze community accept these instructions, something in the middle of the pandemic. You know, we are big families, we are a small community, we are a close community, we are living together in somehow crowded villages, and to belong to a small community, it seems that you are more committed to take part in celebration, in wedding, or in other situation. So this is the way to get infected. Unfortunately, the Druze community, as the Haredim, as the Arab, was hit more with the pandemic. And unfortunately, there is a lot of families that lost members of the family, parents, and so on in this pandemic. Regarding vaccination, yeah, we started today. I think we have already 2 million with 2 shots and 3 million with 1 shot. And I really believe that things have to be done with more related to belief and to traditions in order to convince more people, although at the Druze community, to get the vaccine. Do you know, all over the world, we are very worried about the new mutants, about the South Africa mutants. We less worry about the England mutant because we already know that it is included in the vaccine, but we are not sure about the South Africa mutant. So this somehow makes some people stay at the edge till things get better or get more clear, and then I believe that more people will expose their hand and ask for vaccination.
Thank you. For the sake of time, I'm not going to ask the question I alluded to earlier, but I'm gonna focus on. I'm gonna give the second last question now, and then the last question after that. The second last question has to do with service and the IDF itself. We've touched on that, but that is incredibly important and meaningful, and we've discussed a lot of elements of it. But I want to know from you all, how does the IDF and the Israeli government take care of its Druze soldiers, and what more could be done to provide for them in terms of benefits? I hear in the United States and where I'm from in Canada, lone soldiers are cared for in many different ways by the government, but how are Druze soldiers cared for?
It's maybe it's worthwhile to say that we are so connected to the IDF. Sometimes I think that the Druze in Israel feel that they are more citizens of the IDF than they are citizens of the country. The IDF is an amazing institution, and it's behind many improvements and benefits also for the Druze community in general. I think big part of the academization of the Druze community started with the IDF. That because it's an educated military and because it demands its officers to finish first degree and second degree, the Druze has benefited from this in an amazing way. The IDF now is pushing Druze to go to technological areas. Professor Zarka is a great example of how the medical corps and the military also became a great place to promote, medical doctors. And I know that in the legal side, we have now lawyers and judges in the military. So not just in the IDF, we started the IDF as warriors in the field. Today, the Druze are doctors and lawyers and cyber fighters, which is pilots in the Air Force. So we are very represented in the intelligent, high-level parts of the military as well. This is a great change. Regarding what can be done, I want to tell you, and this is an opportunity, to thank our American Jewish friends, because they are already doing things, and I know that they can do more. They need to get to know the Druze community, because they will find that we are twin communities in a way that half of our identity is very tied to Israel. But we have another half, and the same with you. Half of your identity is your Jewish identity is tied to Israel, and you have another half. And we already benefited greatly from the Jewish communities overseas. I grew up in Osafia, going to a youth club that belonged to BBYO. I went to a school in Haifa in Leubik because of Rabbi Samuels, who decided, it's a reform school, who decided to bring Druze kids from the Carmel to study there. It's a private school, so we got great education. And as I mentioned before, I went to Harvard because of an American Jewish family. So we already received a lot. I know today that there are a lot of families through the IDF who are supporting Druze soldiers. But there's a lot of needs, and there's a lot that can be done. I think that the Druze Israeli civil society need the support of the American Jews, and they can play a major role into supporting the Druze community, helping our young generation get more opportunities, and especially those soldiers who really give their best years in the most dangerous units. And when they go out, sometimes they go into a difficult world, and they need support to go back to study, to start their life. And I hope that we will see more of that kind of support in the future.
I hope so too. And speaking on behalf of American Jewry, we're happy to help. I want to move to our last question and bring Gazala back. Gazala, I'm going to ask you first. Our final question is this: in Judaism, we have this concept of Hakarat, Hatov, showing gratitude, and this conversation and this exploration of the Druze community in 2021 has helped many people, as you've seen from the chat, explore and understand the Druze community's understanding of itself and its place in Israeli society. But the community needs to be recognized more, as we've seen. And that is why this week, Jewish organizations and synagogues are sending this global show of support, this global Hakarat Hatov to the Druze community. So you mentioned that 95% of your circles here in New York are Israeli, and you have the Druze community as well. So I'm curious, what does this Hakarat Hatov mean to you? And then we'll move to Professor Zarka and Ambassador Mansour.
So sorry, I didn't understand what's again, what's this like?
So this program is part of a whole week of programs all over the world, thanking the Druze community for not only their service in the IDF, but also their being part of the mosaic, being part of Israeli society, being so giving of themselves and their communities. If there's one thing if there's one word that I believe as an outsider that sums up the Druze experience, it's being givers, not takers. And I want to know, the Druze community is not recognized all the time. No one says thank you these days. My mother always told me, you've got to be polite. You've got to say thank you. So here we are. We're saying thank you. Why is this meaningful?
Thank you again for what you're doing right now. I think that's true that so many people, they don't know about Druze because, like you said, they give, they don't take. They always, more than welcome to give whatever they can for their country, for their people, and I don't think they ask for return. I think what you're doing right now, it's we really appreciate it, and somehow it's clear enough to everybody what the Druze doing. Like they mentioned before, like if we go back to the history, what they giving and what they did, it's a huge. And I just want to say something. They've been asking me a lot, especially after the law, what I feel about it, and if I feel like I'm second class, I will say I never felt this way. I belong to a great community, great people. Everybody like who knows what Druze, always know good things about Druze. They are very loyal people, very nice people, very peaceful people. I don't feel like one law could let me feel I'm second class or something. I think the opposite. People who doesn't appreciate what we did to the country and what we do, I think they should be ashamed and feeling that way. But again, I will say thank you for what you're doing. This is helping a lot. And I think also I was part of it here in New York through food and restaurant to let know maybe like a small percentage of the American that there is something called Druze and we are exist. It doesn't matter, maybe it's simple, it's a restaurant, which is, it's not like I did a huge thing, but I think thanks to the New York Times and Daily News and all the media, a few percentage already know that we are exist. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You should know that when I told some of our board members that Chef Gazala Halabi was coming on, they're like, Gazala, we love Gazalas. It's awesome. So you've got some backers here. You've got some friends. Professor Zarka, what does this Hakarat Hatov mean to you?
I would like to say three things. The first one regarding the IDF. I really believe that the IDF today is maybe the best place that enable an equal opportunity to the Druze community, to the Druze men when they enlist the army. It wasn't the situation when I enlisted the army. I am saying that because I want to have a tikva for better situation at the other systems of the government. The second thing, you mentioned already that the next parasha is Parashat Yitro. And I think this one must remind us that we had met the Jewish people and the Druze people many long years ago, and we have many values to share together as a minorities, as the different values of living in this world, to think about the next life. I think these issues, we have to remind it, to still remind it. I really want to wish my country, my beloved country, Israel, a lot of light, prosperity, security, and health. I want to thank you, the UNOAM, the JCRC, for this opportunity. Hakarat Toda, it's really something that make you feel a part, not just of the country, but all the Jewish people all over the world. So thank you.
Thank you. And Ambassador, you have the last word before a special surprise.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, yeah, I would like to thank you as my friends. I'm coming from the diplomatic world. Words have meanings, symbols have meaning. What you've done today is important. I hope that it becomes a tradition that every year we meet during this week of the Parashat Yitro. Is a great timing for that. We would need, I think, in the same way that Yitro helped Moses control the nation, and he was in a way the first leadership and the public administration advisor in history. We need some of that of Israel today, and I think Israel would be in a much better place if we would have pay attention a little bit more to the Druze community, and the same with the Jewish communities in North America. We appreciate, as I mentioned before, what you've been doing so far. We don't take it for granted. It's very important to strengthen this line. By the way, one small thing to see how deep is this Jewish-Druze relationship goes. When you send your kids in Taglit to Israel to discover their Jewish roots, one of the things that they say they love about Israel is going to the Druze community. So we are connected in more ways that you can imagine. And I think this relationship can just do good for Druze and Jews all over the world. As you see, even the name is confusing, Druze and Jews, it's almost the same letters. And I think we should continue on this track. I hope one day we in Israel organize an event like this to thank our Jewish brothers and sisters around the world also for what they've been doing for us in Israel. And I hope we will find a way to grow this relationship, because I think our destiny is connected. When I work as an ambassador overseas, my Jewish friends in those countries use my story of achievement in Israel to ask their own governments to give them the same rights in their countries. So again, I mean, this story comes in a very unusual and unexpected ways. So thank you for this effort. Thank you for this event. And again, hopefully it will become a tradition and we will meet again here next year.
Well, I assure you this will become a tradition, because we look forward to doing this year after year during this week. So this is the inaugural. You can say you were part of history. But before we conclude, we have a very special surprise for our guest. Joining us from the Druze Veterans Association, the people responsible for the Global Week of Hakarat Hatov to the Druze Defenders of Israel. Please welcome the chairman of the Druze Veterans Association, Mr. Koftan Halabi, and representing the International Friends of the Druze Veterans Association, Dr. Michael Cohen. Gentlemen. They're coming, I promise. There we go.
I'm the American. I'll let Koftan go first. Koftan, תדליק את המצלמה. There you go.
Hi, good evening.
Go ahead, Koftan.
No.
Koftan,
Hi.
go ahead.
קופטן, השידור שלך. קופטן.
טן, ערב טוב, אתה יכול לדבר, לא שומעים אותך.
קליטה טובה.
Okay, one of the, and while he gets it set up, that is one of the issues that we are dealing with. Even the telecommunications, we had a very short-lived government with a wonderful, fantastic telecommunications minister who really, really went out. He went out to the Bedouin, he went out to the Druze, he went up to the communities that were farthest away from the center. He spent a tremendous amount of time and effort to set up a way. And he came to Usfia, he came to Dalit al-Carmel, he sat with us, and a plan was put into place. And now we're gonna have to wait for the next minister to show up and decide if he or she want to continue it. I'm here to introduce Mr. Koftan Halabi. Koftan is a visionary, like his grandfather. Koftan's grandfather was in the days 36 to the 40s. He was the sheikh, the leader of the Druze community, is a religious leader and a political leader and a community leader. But there's always another person who sits, and he's the one who sits and deals with the religious aspects of the community. And Koftan's grandfather was one of those people, one of those religious advisors to the sheikh. You go to Dalit al-Carmel, you can't miss the name Halabi everywhere you go, because Halabi just means that they come from Haleb, or some ancestor came from Haleb, which is known in English as Aleppo. If you go to Deal, New Jersey, you will find many, many, many people whose name are Haleb, and they're wearing a kippah and a tzitzit and going to Bet Knesset, because just like there are Druze who took the name Halabi, there are many Jews who took the name Halabi.
One of our panelists.
In Deal and in Brooklyn. But I'm not here to tell you more about the Druze community, because you heard from three fantastic representatives. I'm here to tell you what we are doing together, what we can do together, how we can continue from this conversation and make it grow. Koftan, with the ambassador's help and other people's help, about 11 years ago decided that it's time that people who come out of the security services, who have not continued into professions, they didn't continue on to be a doctor or a lawyer, don't fall backwards, but continue to go forwards. He started to challenge them and say, let's figure out ways together the way we could continue to help Israel, not in uniform, just like the ambassador does. How can we help ambassadors around the world as Arabic speaking, or some people say Arabic ethnic? I'm not Druze, so I'm not going to get into that argument amongst them. But how can we use the tools that we have, the pride that we have, the confidence that we have, to help in another way? And they began to fly at their own initiative, with their own money, to different places where Israeli ambassadors said we could use their help, whether it was London or Rome or Madrid, or recently they were in the Ukraine and they were in Frankfurt at the Conference of Presidents annual event in Washington. Last several years, there have been a Druze delegation from the Druze Veterans Association. And last year, the year before COVID, just before COVID started, there was a huge demonstration outside the building against Israel, not necessarily by people from the region, but people who were agitators. And the four representatives, including one who lost his son very heroically on the Temple Mount several years earlier. They went out and they confronted, with no fear, with no sense of inferiority of any kind, they confronted these agitators with Israeli flags in one hand and a Druze flag in another hand, and with a tongue that was completely in Arabic. And the agitators had no idea what to do with themselves because they didn't speak Arabic. And they don't understand the region. And they don't know anything about the fact that they put a flag in their hand because this is a good topic to agitate because they're going to get on TV. And when the TV cameras started showing up, our Druze brothers decided that that's the time to leave. But the demonstration broke up and they left with their tail between their legs. Having succeeded doing that, Koftan tried to push the vision even further. And they began to deal with job placement. They began to work with the Sheikh on finding ways to maximize the capabilities of these amazing people coming out of the military, coming out of the army, coming out of the police force, young, energetic, educated, extremely intelligent, and they weren't finding themselves. When they went to university, and they got into university easily, there's a large, very heavy dropout rate because they get culturally married very young. They have children. They have needs. They have to fend for the family. And school is hard. In Israel, school is very hard, especially the schools that they were getting into, like the Technion and Hebrew U. And he then made a switch together with the late Moshe Arens and decided that it's time that the Druze veterans create the first of its kind in the world, Druze high-tech economic empowerment center. How the Druze themselves feel about this, you can go to the website druzevets.us or druze.tech, just druze.tech, druze.tech, and you can see the ambassador expressing his opinion about this idea. You could see the chairman of the Bank of Israel speaking about this idea, the Minister of Science, who just resigned also, but at the time he was a very energetic young man that wanted to be continuing this field, and the Technion, and the Israeli government. Since that day that the ambassador, as he put it, was standing on concrete, not promises, not words, and I'm quoting you directly, Mr. Ambassador, and correct me if I'm wrong. You said, I'm standing here, I don't go, the ambassador said, I don't go to ceremonies. Koftan called me and he said, there's concrete, it's real, we're building it for real. Then the ambassador said, okay, that I'm coming to, that I want to see, that I want to feel. And as it takes, the first floor is built, and the second floor is beginning to take shape, and the relationships with the Technion are beginning to take shape. 6 government ministries, 6 separate government ministries pledged out of their budgets about 1.5 to 2 million shekel each out of the next budget, when a budget is ever passed in this country again. And the American Jewish community, the European Jewish community, non-Jewish communities who are very supportive of Israel are going to be asked to match that, because that's how the Israeli government builds these kind of programs. They build it with matching funds, where the government puts in half and they ask the organization to find half. There are other projects going on, a memorial center, a proper memorial center, a proper heritage center. And the space that has been allocated for all of these things are all on that brick that the ambassador was standing on in July, that's near the parking lot. So this push towards the future, this push towards innovation, this push towards giving opportunity to people who deserve the opportunity, have done more than their share to earn the opportunity, is the answer to a lot of the questions that I've been seeing in the chat. What comes next? The whole concept, when we were discussing creating the week of Shukran Druze, Dafka, specifically on the week of Yitro, was how can you ask an American Jewish community or a Canadian community, an Australian community, a German community to participate in the building of a new miracle if they don't know the basics of who the people are? The ambassador explained it nicely, and the professor explained it nicely, and I think the chef said it best even, that people don't really know what a Druze is. They know there are good pitot. They know there's fantastic, what's it called? Labane, sorry. Fantastic labane, zata. That's what everybody knows. You say Druze, that's what they know. They have no idea the depth. And it's without going into the dangerous areas that the Druze leadership wants to keep secret and quiet, which is more about the beliefs and so on. This is about people who have worked hard and deserve to be supported for more. So what the DTEC is going to do, the Druze Tech is going to do, together with the Druze Veterans Association, the Israeli government, the federations, and others all over the Jewish world, is to build this and help get jobs, help bring jobs for women, high-tech, well-paying jobs for women into the community, into Sfia, into Dayat al-Carmel, and hopefully, as the Sheikh said, it'll be a model for other places as well. And it's going remarkably well despite COVID. My major thing is I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to all the communities, because it's not overnight to come to community and say, I would like you to spend some time and say thank you to Israel's Druze for what they've done for Israel over the past 90 years practically. And they say to me, okay, but first tell me what a Druze is. And it takes time. And last year was the first year, this is the second year, and we're going to take this model and continue to try and spread it. I can't without the humor, I'm really trying, but we're not going to bite into a bat, but we're going to spread this message virally in a computer sense, not in an illness sense. And I thank everyone. And for me to say Shukran Druze, to say Toda Rabba לכל הדרוזים שגרים בישראל, שעובדים עבור ישראל, שחלק מהחיים שלנו, אני חי, I am alive, I am here, because two Druze decided to put their bodies in front of mine in Lebanon many, many years ago, in two different occasions. They didn't do it because they're Druze, they did it because they were my comrades. And they just happened to be Druze. And that's the way it is. The commander of Israel's medical corps is not the commander of Israel's medical corps because he's Druze. He's the commander of Israel's medical corps because he's a fantastic doctor and a wonderful commander. He happens to be Druze. The commander of the Golani Brigade. He's not the commander because he is Druze. He's a great commander. He happens to be Druze. That's not what matters. What matters is that now we have to look at it. The American Jewish community, the Canadian Jewish community, France, Germany, wherever it is that we are, and we have to say thank you. And we have to realize that this relationship didn't start in 1936. This relationship started back at Mount Sinai, back when the Midianite priest adopted this boy that was running around away from the Pharaoh. And he was scared, and he was in the desert, and he adopted him and brought him in, allowed him to marry his daughter, allowed him to have his grandchildren, and then gave him some fantastic advice, as you said, probably the first successful political consultant, because the Egyptian ones didn't do too well at the time. Thank you, Shukran, and thank you to the JCRC, especially to Noam, who really took the bull by the horns, understood what we were trying to achieve. This is exactly what we were trying to achieve. Put it in play, did it himself with no encouragement, and we will be able to then take this as a model, send it to other organizations, send it to other JCRCs, and show what it is that we want to bring out in the schools and in the synagogues, and yes, in the churches as well, of those that support Israel. Thank you, Shukran, Toda Rabba, and Noam. really, really shukran, Noam.
Well, thank you. I couldn't have done it without all of you on this call. Koftan is here. I know we are 27 minutes over time right now, but Koftan, can I give you a minute to speak?
Thank you, Noam, so much. And thank you, special door, מייקל מילר and JCRC. ותודה רבה חברים, רדה, גזלה, דוקטור זרקה היקר, מייקל, thank you so much. אני מאוד מעריך את זה.
And with that, I also, yes.
Yeah, would you give me 1 minute, please?
Of course.
I want to say, if you could allow me, thank you for, I just lost my dad a month ago, less than a month ago. And I didn't get the chance to say thank you or goodbye. So I want to, since it's shukran, thank you to Daraba, I just want to say to my dad, thank you so much. Jihad Salim Faris Halabi, thank you so much for all what you've done to me. You were a great dad, and rest in peace. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to say my dad.
Gazala, if your father produced a daughter like you, then I'm sure he is very, very happy as he looks down right now.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, you, Gazala, Rita, Salman, Michael, Koftan, everybody for coming, for joining us for today's program. This is the beginning, not the end. Thank you all for your stellar contributions to Israeli society in Israel and around the world. The meaningful, the depth of the Druze community, the depth of contribution, of giving of the Druze community only needs to be reciprocated. And hopefully this is part of that effort. I really, really want to thank you for joining us all today on behalf of the Jewish Community Relations Council of New York and our member organizations. We hope this pandemic ends so that we can all get back to seeing each other in person. And until then, everybody, please stay safe. And I know I'm going to enjoy the Parsha this week. So take care. Shalom.
Thank you. Take care.
Shukran.